In the early spring of 1951, within the restricted perimeter of the Semipalatinsk test site, a 42-year-old engineer-physicist of the second category, Leonid Ivanovich Mezentsev, became the subject of a classified investigation whose details were never officially disclosed. According to the surviving file, Mezentsev had been assigned to Laboratory Section B4, nominally engaged in the calibration of dosimetric instruments under the oversight of the Second Directorate of the Ministry of State Security. His initial appointment was considered routine. His personnel file noted prior service at the Sverdlovsk Instrumentation Combine and a brief period of reserve duty in the radiometric service of the Ministry of Defense. The earliest mention of irregular activity appears in a typed memorandum dated March 17, 1951, authored by Senior Engineer P. Zatov, addressed to Deputy Head of Section B. The memo references unauthorized auxiliary installations constructed by Mezentsev near Observation Post 12, specifically citing 2 cylindrical housings of non-standard manufacture, each containing modified photometric cells connected by improvised leads to unregistered power sources. These devices were not part of the approved measurement array. Zatov requested clarification from the Administrative Technical Commission, adding that readings from the unofficial units display inconsistent gamma deviation values not corroborated by standard instruments. Attached to the same folder is a short internal resolution bearing the notation, "For internal verification only. No formal disciplinary proceedings until confirmation of anomaly." Beneath the typed text, in red pencil, appears the marginal annotation, "Check calibration sources. If counterfeit, refer to operative control." Over the following month, laboratory correspondences show that Mezentsev continued his work with no recorded reprimand. The April field logs, signed by Laboratory Chief Burov, mention only meteorological interference as a possible cause of irregular readings. Nonetheless, the irregularity reappears in the data sheets from the underground station D3, where 2 of Mezentsev's auxiliary sensors were clandestinely reconnected to the main observation circuit by an unidentified hand sometime after April 25. The cable routing was found concealed beneath a maintenance trench later sealed by concrete. A subsequent directive from the Second Directorate, dated May 9, 1951, ordered temporary discontinuation of autonomous measurement activities pending standardization audit. According to witness testimony collected 3 years later, File Addendum 7, 1954, Mezentsev expressed dissatisfaction with the imposed limitations, stating during an informal technical meeting that the existing detectors were blind to half of what was being released. This sentence survives only in a stenographic fragment without contextual elaboration. By June, personnel changes within Section B4 had begun. Engineer Zatov was reassigned to Kurchatov, reportedly for health reasons. No further documentation of his transfer exists in the file. 2 junior technicians, identified as V.K. Rudnev and A.I. Kolsov, were removed from active duty for distribution of unverified data contrary to reporting protocols. Their final data sheets were confiscated by the security liaison officer and remain untraceable. The official testing calendar records an experimental detonation on June 21, 1951, Operation Reference, Test 47/, with radiation output consistent with predicted models. However, a separate envelope, marked Attachment A, not for duplication, contains fragmentary notes in Mezentsev's handwriting comparing readings between official dosimeters. Model DP2, Type 1950, and his unauthorized devices. His figures indicate an unexplained elevation of residual background radiation in peripheral sectors up to 17 hours post-detonation, an interval officially recorded as stable. The notes conclude with an underlined remark: instruments confirm delayed energy manifestation inconsistent with isotope decay tables, origin not atmospheric. No official response to this remark is preserved. The following year, the file shows a shift in tone. A memorandum dated February 3, 1952, signed by Colonel D. M. Starinov, MGB Technical Oversight Division, summarizes internal discussions regarding substandard morale and procedural laxity within the Semipalatinsk Instrumentation Group. Paragraph 4 explicitly names Mezentsev among those displaying undue persistence in pursuing lines of measurement outside assigned tasks. The memo recommends prophylactic reorientation through administrative conversation, not formal sanction. The record of that conversation, if conducted, is missing. Between February and May 1952, the attached laboratory journals show increasingly inconsistent entries, including gaps of up to 10 days between data submissions. A marginal note by an unknown hand in blue pencil reads simply, "Absence is justified by field calibration." During this same period, 2 unscheduled technical excursions were logged to Zone 3A, designated High Contamination Area, both bearing Mezentsev's signature of authorization despite no recorded command order. The first documented escalation occurred after the detonation of Test 55/Hydrodynamic Series, on June 4, 1952. The morning after, Observation Post 9 reported a transient rise in airborne particulates inconsistent with known meteorological phenomena. Standard dosimeters registered negligible change, while Mezentsev's unregistered devices, as cited in Attachment C, recorded pulse emissions of variable half-life, duration 4.2 to 5.6 seconds, recurring at approximately 22-minute intervals. Attempts to replicate these readings on state instruments failed. On June 12, the Scientific Technical Council convened an emergency session. The declassified transcript fragment reads: Chairman, Burov, according to you, these pulses originate where? Unidentified voice, not from surface contamination, possibly atmospheric excitation. Chairman, you mean lightning? Voice, no. Duration does not match. They recur with internal consistency. The name of the responding participant is redacted, though circumstantial context suggests Mezentsev. Following this session, the minutes record a unanimous vote to suspend all unauthorized data-gathering devices until further notice. No such suspension appears to have occurred. 3 weeks later, a sealed telegram, 40, was transmitted from the site to Moscow. To MGB Technical Oversight Division. From Field Liaison, Semipalatinsk Polygon. Subject, unauthorized readings/possible data compromise. Text, auxiliary equipment continues transmitting despite disconnection. Source not located. Recommend inspection under operative control. A handwritten postscript, likely added upon receipt, reads, investigate interference. Verify integrity of local power circuits. No record of a reply survives. The file resumes on July 27, 1952 with an internal summary prepared by a regional investigator, signature illegible, concerning anomalous activity in the southern quadrant. According to this summary, an inspection team led by Mezentsev located 3 detached signal relays buried near an unused shelter designated Point 17B. Each relay exhibited residual current without connection to any registered power grid. The official explanation attributes the current to inductive coupling with nearby telemetric lines. However, the appended sketch by Mezentsev suggests the devices emitted low-frequency oscillations not accounted for by the cited explanation. He annotated the drawing with self-sustaining, possible feedback through surrounding medium. This annotation was later crossed out in black ink. On August 14, 1952, Mezentsev was temporarily relocated to Kurchatov City for consultative assistance with calibration of prototype equipment. No documentation describes the nature of the prototype. Within 2 months, he returned to the polygon. The personnel summary for that period notes stable work discipline and improvement of methodological clarity. Yet a private communication, declassified fragment 18/ sent from an unnamed colonel to Directorate Headquarters on November 22 contains the remark, Engineer Mezentsev demonstrates unregulated initiative in instrumentation beyond standard specification. May require psychological evaluation. The following year, the anomalies resumed. Between March and June 1953, site meteorological logs register a pattern of intermittent electromagnetic disturbances coinciding with local detonations, though official cause is ascribed to solar activity. Unofficial readings preserved in the same folder, typed on different paper stock, reproduced the same data but with markedly higher amplitude figures. The heading reads, Preliminary Values, MES, not for release. The correlation between these readings and the 1953 solar flare records remains uncertain. Internal correspondence dated July 2, 1953, from senior physicist A. L. Varnon to the MGB Scientific Technical Bureau, notes. In 2 cases, tests 63/ and 64/, differential readings exceed background by 3 magnitudes when measured via the unauthorized photometric array previously confiscated in 1952. The instruments in question were apparently reassembled using parts from decommissioned units. Recommend thorough audit and control of personnel access to scrap storage. An appended annotation, unsigned, do not pursue further. Unofficial instrumentation not recognized as data source. No further comment. On September 6, 1953, an internal disciplinary notice was filed against technician Rudnev, previously removed in 1951, apparently reinstated under temporary contract, for transmission of laboratory measurements without verification stamp. In his statement, Rudnev claimed he had acted under direct instruction from Comrade L. Mezentsev. No response from Mezentsev is preserved. Instead, a short memorandum by Chief Engineer Burov concludes the matter, discussed, closed. The record for the following winter is incomplete. Several archival sheets are missing or replaced with blank placeholders stamped, withdrawn 1961. The next surviving entry, dated February 15, 1954, introduces the term incident of thermal deviation. The summary notes that during pre-detonation diagnostics for test 72/ unexplained heat signatures were recorded at 3 observation points not within the blast radius. Standard thermometric equipment showed no anomaly. Mezentsev's auxiliary recorders, however, captured a sustained temperature increase of plus 4.6 degrees Celsius over baseline, persisting for 2 hours prior to detonation, then subsiding abruptly 11 minutes after the blast. Subsequent investigation attributed the readings to instrument drift. One of the attached handwritten pages, unattributed but consistent with Mezentsev's earlier notes, states, source precedes event. Not residual, initiatory. The phrase, initiatory, is underlined twice. Following this incident, higher administrative oversight was introduced. A confidential order, 57/54, signed by Deputy Minister of State Security Colonel General Sudoplatov, authorized enhanced internal supervision of experimental divisions engaged in radiometric activity at Semipalatinsk. The order stipulated that no independent measurements are to be conducted without written sanction. All personnel were instructed to surrender private notebooks. A distribution list appended to the order includes Mezentsev's name among those specifically to be monitored without notification. Nonetheless, supplementary notebooks bearing his handwriting continued to appear in the file. A marginal record dated July 18, 1954 lists an inventory of confiscated materials from Mezentsev's quarters. 3 unnumbered aluminum cylinders containing sealed photometric cells. 2 notebooks, 1 partially burned. 12 meters of insulated wire, non-standard composition. A portable Geiger counter with unregistered serial number. The covering note states, items transferred to Section K for technical assessment. No assessment report is attached. Within months, reports of minor operational irregularities resumed. On October 2, 1954, internal telemetry logs registered short bursts of static interference preceding the initiation of Test 79 by several minutes. The interference ceased immediately after detonation. Official explanation, atmospheric fluctuation, uncorrelated with test parameters. Mezentsev's private sheet, copy preserved, attributes the phenomenon to cross-medium radiation echo, amplitude decreasing logarithmically after each detonation. The phrase, cross-medium, appears nowhere else in the file. A memorandum from the site's medical unit dated December 12, 1954 refers to recurrent fatigue and disorientation among laboratory personnel, noting that engineer Mezentsev reports frequent auditory sensations described as rhythmic pulsations. The attached recommendation advises temporary rest, but the record of medical leave is blank. In early 1955, administrative tension increased. A coded telegram, 89, from Field Control to Moscow reads: Subject continues to conduct parallel measurements in restricted perimeter. Unclear motive. Suggest transfer to secondary facility for evaluation under controlled conditions. No confirmation of transfer exists. Instead, the March 1955 entries indicate that Mezentsev was reassigned to supervise calibration of atmospheric sampling units. Effectively a promotion. His personnel evaluation for that quarter describes him as methodically exact, occasionally inexpressive, loyal to technical directives. Then, on May 27, 1955, the second major escalation occurred. During routine pretest preparations, one of Mezentsev's modified detectors reportedly emitted an audible tone, described by witnesses as low mechanical humming. The device was immediately disconnected and sealed for examination. Internal Report 302 states, upon inspection, no electrical source or vibration mechanism identified. Device produced acoustic resonance spontaneously. Duration 14 seconds. An appendix titled Supplementary Observation describes secondary effects, temporary increase in static discharge on metal surfaces within a 10-meter radius. The event was catalogued as Type 3 technical malfunction and officially attributed to electrostatic buildup. However, subsequent maintenance logs record replacement of grounding systems across the entire observation sector, implying continued concern. The following month, a handwritten note, unsigned, presumed Mezentsev, dated June 18 reads, resonance identical to pulse emission of 1952. No decay. System persists independently of stimulus. This is the last document in his handwriting before his name ceases to appear in the daily logs. From July to October 1955, Section B4 underwent administrative restructuring. Personnel rotations increased, several employees were reassigned to unrelated installations. The site's internal bulletin mentions the integration of new automated measurement systems, but does not reference the older manual units. An internal report from November, titled On Consolidation of Radiometric Oversight, notes that legacy experimental equipment has been disassembled and scrapped per directive. In the margin of the same report, faintly legible pencil writing reads, "Not all located." A single entry dated January 9, 1956 marks the official conclusion of the case. Engineer-physicist second category L.I. Mezentsev relieved of active duties owing to health considerations. Further participation in fieldwork suspended. No record of medical treatment or reassignment is attached. Subsequent file pages consist solely of administrative correspondence concerning missing laboratory property. The final surviving document, dated April 22, 1956, is an internal memo from the accounting department. According to the attached data, inventory discrepancies persist regarding 2 unregistered photometric housings and 1 prototype Geiger counter previously listed as confiscated items. No traceable serial numbers. Responsible party, Mezentsev, Ret. The line Mezentsev, Ret, is underlined. Below the typed text, a handwritten note reads, Final report withheld per instruction 14. No further information was recorded. The subsequent materials preserved in auxiliary folder K312/ originate from the archives of the 3rd section, Main Directorate for Special Research Facilities, and were appended to the Mezentsev dossier post factum, possibly during the internal audit of 1958. The compilation lacks continuity, several sheets bear water damage and partial redactions. However, cross-references to other classified files confirm that the documents concern continued investigation into residual irregularities observed at the Semipalatinsk test site following the withdrawal of engineer L.I. Mezentsev. A brief cover note by senior archivist Kabanov, undated but stamped 1957, summarizes the issue in standardized phrasing. In relation to the events of 1955 to 1956, certain discrepancies in dosimetric readings recorded on non-standard instruments have not been fully reconciled. Responsible personnel unavailable for clarification. Recommend restricted review under Technical Classification, Special Radiometric Phenomena. The earliest surviving entry of this secondary period is a telegram dated February 18, 1956, addressed to the 2nd Directorate, bearing the signature of Field Officer F. M. Ilyashin. Following disassembly of obsolete detector housings, residual voltage persists despite disconnected terminals. Phenomenon limited to devices formerly under supervision of ENG Mezentsev. No external power. Awaiting instruction. In the margin appears an annotation in graphite pencil: collect specimens, seal under glass, forward to Moscow. The attached acknowledgement slip from Central Technical Laboratory confirms receipt of one container marked reactor fragments, but the description, reactor, is crossed out and replaced with instrument remnants. No further correspondence attached. On March 4, 1956, a security inspection report, 18/records, unexpected fluctuation of background field within instrument storage, amplitude 0.4 to 0.6 Mr. above norm. The report attributes this to probable contamination of flooring material. However, the inspection photographs, classified negatives listed but not preserved, note faint luminescence around a sealed box labeled B for residue. The phrase, optical artifact, is typed over the corresponding entry. From 12 to March 19, 3 consecutive entries in the Daily Operational Journal indicate minor disturbances in telemetry readings from Sector D. Each notation bears the same explanatory phrase: instrumental noise, no corrective action. A marginal comment by Lieutenant A. Chernov asks, noise corresponds to same interval as Mezentsev pulses? The question is left unanswered. The next chronological item, dated April 2, 1956, is a formal report addressed to the Deputy Head of Technical Oversight. Subject: unscheduled signal detection. Summary: during calibration of atmospheric sampling units, residual devices, designation uncertain, emitted short-frequency impulses registering on unauthorized channels. Attempts to trace origin unsuccessful. Possible mechanical vibration from ventilation system ruled out. The closing paragraph notes, although comparable readings were reported in 1952 and 1955, no causal mechanism established. Recommends suppression of related documentation to prevent misinterpretation by unqualified personnel. That same month, a personnel bulletin lists the final departure of Engineer L. Mezentsev from active records, effective April 14, 1956. His personnel card, Form 1, carries the remark, released from duty without further assignment. Date of birth, previous addresses, and family data are present but have been partially obliterated by ink corrosion. According to the recollection of archivists interviewed in 1960, see attached note, verbal statements, unsigned, no pension file under his name was ever located. The last bureaucratic trace is a delivery receipt for his identification pass, marked, returned, destroyed. Beyond this administrative conclusion, the file continues with scattered memoranda compiled between late 1956 and early 1957 by various technical divisions, all referencing continued field irregularities. Though none mention Mezentsev by name, several contain identical phrasing to his earlier annotations. For example, a confidential summary dated September 17, 1956 refers to energy manifestation preceding test sequence, phrased identically to his earlier note, source precedes event. Another, from November of the same year, introduces the term resonant emissions of local medium. This language had not appeared in any official Soviet documentation prior to Mezentsev's reports. By December, the anomalies were no longer confined to laboratory records. An internal communiqué from the Meteorological Service, 12/, records unexplained electrical discharges during periods of atmospheric calm. The accompanying commentary states, field measurements reveal low-intensity radiation pulses repeating at 20 to 23-minute intervals. Hypothesis of equipment malfunction not supported by cross-comparison. Attached to this communiqué is a carbon copy of a prior note bearing the heading, Supplement to Deleted File, B, for 1952 to 1955. The text is heavily censored, but the surviving lines read, Identical recurrence period, amplitude decay unaffected by shielding, source location indeterminate. On February 11, 1957, a restricted circular was issued by the MGB Special Oversight Department, all data referencing autonomous radiometric anomalies to be consolidated under classification code, R326. Separate indexing prohibited. The term R326 subsequently replaces all explicit references to the earlier B for phenomena. 1 month later, an incident occurred during preparations for Test 90/. A preliminary status report, classified Eyes Only, recounts the following. At 10:43 hours, control room registered unassigned signal on auxiliary channel. Frequency consistent with low-band pulse previously observed during experimental series of 1952. Signal intensity moderate, duration 5.3 seconds. Source triangulated to abandoned bunker 17B, former equipment storage. Site inspection revealed no electrical activity, no radiation above background. The report concludes, anomaly persists in absence of hardware. Classification elevated to confidential/technical. 3 follow-up memoranda reference this occurrence indirectly under the category, non-standard electromagnetic behavior. In one, dated April 6, 1957, the investigating officer notes that resonant emission remains detectable at regular intervals independent of external conditions, adding that power source undetermined. No official explanation recorded. Subsequent entries indicate growing administrative unease. On May 15, 1957, an urgent telegram was sent from the site to Moscow. Persistent residual emission detected in decommissioned sector. Request directive for neutralization or sealing. A reply, dated May 18, orders, seal bunker. Suspend discussion. All related notes to be reclassified and forwarded to Central Archive. The sealing protocol, 41, was executed 3 days later. The operation log indicates presence of 5 officers and 1 civilian specialist. The specialist's name, partially legible, reads L.I.M. Ev. The final letters are obscured. No further mention of this participant appears in subsequent documents. By late summer of 1957, the site underwent partial modernization under the newly formed State Committee for Atomic Energy. The modernization report lists decontamination, structural reinforcement, and installation of new telemetric array in accordance with improved standards. A handwritten annotation on page 3 states, Legacy System R326 isolated and secured. The final page of the report contains an unsigned note, emission no longer measurable by standard instruments. From this point, the dossier shifts in provenance. Documents dated 1958 to 1959 originate not from Semipalatinsk but from the Leningrad Institute of Applied Geophysics, indicating that samples or data had been transferred there for further analysis. The transfer receipt identifies sealed container marked B4/residue. Contents unspecified. The first Leningrad Memorandum, dated February 4, 1958, describes persistent electrical potential in sealed conductive medium. The attached measurement tables indicate a constant 0.22 MV potential difference across a container surface composed of inert alloy. The phenomenon persisted for 18 months without observable decay. One of the Institute's researchers, Dr. P. N. Likachev, suggested possible piezoelectric activation due to microscopic deformation, but his subsequent note, April 14, 1958, contradicts this explanation, stating, "No crystal structure present. Conductivity isotropic." The investigation was halted under Directive 71/, citing lack of practical application. Nevertheless, a handwritten annotation on the same directive reads, "Retain sample under inert atmosphere." Cross-reference with file R-326, Semipalatinsk. In late 1958, the MGB was restructured into the Committee for State Security, KGB, and all classified technical materials were redistributed under new indexing. The Mezentsev case file, now labeled R-326/1951-56, was merged with the Central Archives, Closed Research Dossier 12. The index card bears a red diagonal stamp, Access Category 4, Storage Duration, Indefinite. The remaining entries, compiled in 1959, take the form of internal summaries prepared for oversight committees. The following excerpts represent the last known references to the subject. As noted in the surviving file, repeated phenomena of unaccounted radiation emission occurred in 1951 to 1956 within the Semipalatinsk test site perimeter. Standard instruments registered no deviation. Independent measurements conducted without authorization by engineer-physicist L.I. Mezentsev indicated anomalies inconsistent with isotope decay laws. Subsequent verification attempts inconclusive. The personnel involved were reallocated or released. No disciplinary actions formally recorded. The origin of the anomalous readings remains unestablished. The responsible division recommends cessation of all inquiries pending technical justification. The personal archive of L.I. Mezentsev could not be located. According to attached witness statements, the engineer departed the site in 1956 and did not report to his place of residence. No further trace established. The last declassified entry, dated October 12, 1959, is a short memorandum without header. Residual emission at Bunker 17B remains detectable by unregistered devices only. All official detectors show null. Further intervention deemed unnecessary. File retained for reference. Following this memorandum, the dossier ends. A single supplementary note, attached decades later but stamped retroactively, 1959, appears on the reverse of the final page. The final report of Engineer Mezentsev, title unknown, was not located among transferred materials. Probable destruction prior to reclassification. Below the typed lines is a faint penciled remark in another hand, or withheld. No further information was recorded. According to Registry Card 12/1959-61, the consolidated file on subject, R-326, was transferred from the Technical Oversight Division to the 5th Department of the Committee for State Security for Controlled Retention. A cover sheet stamped December 3, 1959 bears the rubric, "Not for research citation. For operational observation only." The contents thereafter exhibit a marked change in format. Continuous typewritten pages are replaced by intermittent internal memoranda, redacted field notes, and translation slips from subdepartments with overlapping jurisdiction. The first document of this phase, dated January 14, 1960, records reappearance of unaccounted signal emissions in the vicinity of Sector D, Semipalatinsk Polygon, citing a report from the newly installed automatic monitoring network. The text specifies that standard calibration yields null, yet auxiliary control lines detect periodic low-voltage impulses of undetermined source, amplitude 0.3 to 0.4 MV, recurrence interval 22 minutes. The identical interval had appeared in the 1952 and 1957 anomalies. A marginal remark by analyst V. Mezentsev reads, "Pattern identical to withdrawn series B4. No residual hardware present. Consider possibility of subterranean induction." This remark is struck through in blue pencil, followed by the phrase, "discussed and closed." On February 3, 1960, a restricted telegram was issued from the 5th Department to the Leningrad Institute of Applied Geophysics requesting a status update on sample B4/residue. The Institute's reply, dated February 6, reads, "Sample exhibits stable electrical potential with no discernible change since 1958. Observation ongoing per standing order. No staff modifications." A follow-up directive instructs that further commentary unnecessary unless deviation exceeds established baseline. The baseline figures are missing from the record. Between March and May 1960, a series of short notes labeled "translation excerpts" appear in the file. Their origin is unclear. Each is typed on paper bearing a foreign watermark, Union Export Paperworks, Leipzig. The texts appear to be partial translations of internal Soviet memoranda into another language, then retranslated into Russian with evident errors. Marginal initials T.R/K suggest technical reference/classified. One excerpt reads, "Electrical persistence without fuel." Suggests similarity to field test under desert conditions 1956. Operator LM referenced. The presence of these translation slips implies limited external liaison, though no official record of such cooperation survives. On May 27, 1960, a memorandum by Colonel N. E. Gapanov, head of the 5th Department's Technical Section, summarized the situation as follows. Residual phenomena classified are 326 remain observable within confined perimeter of Semipalatinsk testing range. The origin of recurring pulses undetermined. Historical association with activities of former engineer-physicist L. Mezentsev noted. No operational threat established. Continued registration authorized under passive monitoring regime. An appended note adds, no dissemination beyond internal index. Observers to report quarterly. Quarterly reports survive for only 2 periods, August and November 1960. The August report, unsigned, lists 5 detection events of identical interval and amplitude, with no environmental correlation. The November entry, in contrast, states, emission amplitude diminishing. Possible natural attenuation. Beneath this line, in faint pencil, unlikely, signal steady, not decaying. The handwriting corresponds to that found on earlier translation notes but is otherwise unidentifiable. Parallel to these observations, the Leningrad Institute submitted its own technical brief, 22, in October 1960. The brief outlines a test performed on sealed conductive medium, sample B, /residue. The test consisted of exposing the container to alternating electromagnetic fields to determine inducement response. The result, recorded on oscilloscope traces, shows counterphase oscillation of internal potential relative to applied field. The summary concludes, sample behaves as autonomous resonant circuit without external power. The notation, autonomous resonant circuit, is underlined twice by an unknown reviewer. No recommendation follows. By early 1961, administrative control of the case transferred to the newly formed State Committee for Defense Technology. File index cards were retyped, removing explicit names. The category, Mezentsev, LI, is replaced with the code, operator M. All earlier personal data were reclassified under separate storage. An internal explanatory note, dated February 12, 1961, explains the change, to ensure terminological consistency across classified archives. All personnel identifiers in case are 326 converted to neutral operator codes. Historical biographical records sealed. No cross-reference provided. During this same period, multiple unrelated facilities reported transient anomalies resembling those previously documented at Semipalatinsk. A communication from the Krasnoyarsk radiometric station, 5/, dated April 4, 1961 mentions periodic pulses resembling test interference, not originating from instrumentation. A second from Arzimas, 16, dated April 19, notes intermittent synchronization of background counters every 22 plus or minus 1 minutes. Both references were consolidated under R. 326 without comment. On May 7, 1961, the Committee for Defense Technology issued Directive 43/Cease external measurements concerning residual emissions, maintain passive registry only. No publication, no acknowledgement in technical literature. The directive is signed by Deputy Chairman Karpov and countersigned, for information, by a representative of the Committee for State Security. The effect of this order was the practical freezing of all research under Code R. 326. Monitoring continued in silence, with reports restricted to brief numerical summaries. Among the last surviving operational notes is one dated July 26, 1961, describing short-lived acoustic resonance in sealed bunker 17B, audible only on induction microphones. The entry specifies that no atmospheric vibration detected, resonance duration 12 seconds. The phenomenon corresponded precisely to the 1955 acoustic incident associated with Mezentsev's modified detectors. The report was marked, for observation only, no intervention. 2 months later, a handwritten addendum states, emission ceased. Readings null since March 9, 61. No explanation provided. The remainder of the folder contains administrative documentation pertaining to closure and reclassification. On October 21, 1961, file R. 326 was officially sealed under Order 176/, subject concluded. Retain for archival continuity. No public release. The order specifies that all technical materials pertaining to unauthorized instruments of former engineer L. Mezentsev, are to be destroyed after microfilming. The microfilm reference number, 7-112/, appears in the archive register but has no surviving reel. A separate storage ledger from 1963 lists the entry, R326/Mezentsev materials, not located. The corresponding remark reads simply, lost during transfer. No further references to the file appear in any subsequent institutional inventories. However, a secondary paper trail survives in the form of post-1961 correspondence among subordinate archives. A letter from the All-Union Research Institute of Metrology, 14, to the Central Archive, dated November 4, 1964, requests clarification regarding unverified potential difference observed in long-term sealed alloys, origin unknown, possibly related to R326 documentation. The Central Archive's response, information restricted. Materials destroyed 1961. Inquiry terminated. Despite this assertion, a 1966 audit report from the same archive includes a footnote referencing microfilm fragment of unidentified technical notes, probable Semipalatinsk origin. The fragment description matches the formatting of Mezentsev's handwritten annotations, narrow margin, small cursive, underlined terms, initiatory, and cross-medium. The note is labeled illegible, not relevant. Thereafter, all mentions of the phenomenon cease until 1974, when a circular from the Ministry of Medium Machine Building references unexplained low-level emission detected by automated dosimetry grid near former Semipalatinsk installations. The event is described as minor technical irregularity, possibly due to residual equipment left from early experimental phases. The classification line again reads, R326. No follow-up correspondence preserved. The surviving portion of the dossier concludes with an institutional summary prepared in 1978 by the State Archive of the USSR, Department of Technical and Scientific Records. The summary is formatted as a standard verification report and remains the last officially known document referencing the case. According to available archival data, between 1951 and 1956, a series of non-standard radiometric readings were obtained at the Semipalatinsk testing range by personnel of Laboratory Section B-4 under the Ministry of State Security. The principal participant was engineer-physicist second category L, Mezentsev. Unofficial instrumentation employed by said individual recorded anomalous emissions not reproducible by standard equipment. Multiple investigations yielded no definitive conclusions. Subsequent monitoring, 1957 to 1961, registered intermittent pulse signals of low amplitude and uncertain origin. No connection to nuclear operations established. Project codename R326 retained for internal referencing only. As noted in the surviving file, no final technical report authored by Mezentsev was recovered. His administrative status remains unverified beyond 1956. No evidence of disciplinary action or criminal proceeding found. The physical materials associated with R326 were reported destroyed during reclassification. Microfilm copies missing. By decision of the Archival Commission dated March 14, 1978, Case R326 is deemed closed and excluded from regular review. Storage extended until further order. A final line appears beneath the typed text, entered by hand in faded ink, filed without conclusion. Phenomenon dormant. No further information was recorded. During the subsequent 3 weeks, according to the radiation observation log for Sector 7, background fluctuations remained within the limits established by Instruction 42-M-51. However, in comparative tables compiled by the Internal Control Laboratory, a consistent discrepancy was noted between standard instruments and the unregistered installations assembled under the supervision of engineer Mezentsev. The discrepancy manifested as a minor but persistent shift, plus or minus 0.08 R/H, with gradual nighttime increase, which could not be reconciled with the existing decay model. The memorandum submitted by Mezentsev to Department 3 was returned without resolution. The surviving copy in the duplicate archive bears the stamp, "For information only, not to be circulated." On July 6, 1953, a 4-person group arrived at the test site under the cover of a Technical Safety Inspection Commission. An act was drawn up, signed by Site Chief F.I. Drobichev, stating, "All data related to subject Gamma North 2 removed for verification, equipment not accounted for in inventory sealed." The inventory listed 3 small K-18 counters, 2 reel-to-reel recording coils, 1 observation log, and an A4 folder marked, "Measurements Outside Network." Following this, Mezentsev was instructed to temporarily cease measurements and surrender his second category access. The personnel report dated July 14, 1953 contains the annotation, "Removed from operational duties, transferred to Calculation Analytical Group." According to the laboratory attendance register, Mezentsev continued daily presence at the facility, performing formal processing of data from prior test series. It is noted that between August and October 1953, he repeatedly requested access to underground storage 2B, where reserve cesium-137 sources for calibration were maintained. Requests were not granted. Copies from official record-keeping do not survive. On the reverse of one blank form, in pencil, is written, "Check instrument response outside network phase." The author of the annotation remains unidentified. On November 11, 1953, at 8:37 hours, the internal communication line recorded a brief conversation between the shift duty officer and the operator of Sector 7, during which the operator was instructed to immediately report a spike on the control channel. The audio transcript, F513B, L27, confirms that at the moment of activation, the main station recorded 0, while the parallel branch, unregistered K-18 sensor, registered 2.4 R/H. The duty log contains a marginal note, "Possible false activation due to external influence." No record of follow-up verification exists. At the end of December 1953, a directive arrived from Moscow increasing measures against the leakage of official information, referencing the Semipalatinsk site without specifying a number. Under this order, Mezentsev's group was included. All personnel of second category were required to submit personal notes and refrain from any observations outside the plan. Inspection conducted by Senior Inspector K.I. Morozov found that in Locker 11, assigned to Mezentsev, film strips with unauthorized recordings of control panels and fragments of tables with English inscriptions, including background drift and unregistered pulse, were discovered. Morozov's report of January 2, 1954 notes, "No evidence of intent to contact foreign representatives." Presumably self-directed translation of technical terms for comparative purposes. During the spring session of 1954, site management approved temporary conservation of certain field posts, including Sector 7. Mezentsev was reassigned to the calculation group for analysis of prior explosion series, 12 and 13, but his personal file, F122D-L9, contains marginal notation in pencil. Compare with prior pulse sequences. Maintain observation for potential residual activity. A memorandum dated June 7, 1954 from the Deputy Chief of Laboratory Section B4 confirms the continuation of residual readings. Auxiliary devices formerly operated by engineer Mezentsev indicate minor but consistent deviations from registered norms. No intervention required. Data to be filed under restricted observation. Between July and September 1954, 2 reports were filed regarding short-term low-level electromagnetic pulses detected near abandoned bunkers within the southern quadrant of the polygon. The reports specify that all standard instruments measured normal background levels. Only the auxiliary instruments, previously associated with Mezentsev, recorded deviations. One of the documents contains a handwritten annotation in the margin, compared to 1952 to 1953 pulse intervals. Same 22-minute recurrence pattern. No additional commentary or explanatory note is attached. On November 15, 1954, the site's administrative register indicates the temporary removal of Mezentsev from all field assignments under Directive 77/54. The entry states, Engineer Physicist, 2nd Category L, Mezentsev, suspended from operational measurements. Assigned to desk analysis duties. Access to sensitive equipment restricted. The document includes no reference to disciplinary proceedings or medical evaluation. During early 1955, internal communications reflect increasing concern regarding residual phenomena. A memorandum from the Technical Oversight Division dated February 23 notes, Sector D observations continue to report low-level emissions detectable only by previously unauthorized equipment. Equipment inspection reveals no connection to power lines. Phenomenon recorded intermittently at 22-minute intervals. A follow-up note by Lieutenant A. V. Chernov reads, Pattern matches B4 series previously archived. Mechanism unidentified. Recommend passive monitoring only. The annotation is crossed out in blue pencil, with the subsequent line typed, discussed. No further action. On May 27, 1955, a minor escalation was recorded. During routine pretest calibration, one of Mezentsev's modified detectors emitted an audible low-frequency tone. The device was disconnected and sealed. Internal Report 302 specifies, inspection reveals no electrical source or mechanical mechanism. Acoustic resonance observed spontaneously. Duration 14 seconds. Temporary increase in static discharge noted within 10-meter radius. The event was catalogued as Type 3 technical malfunction and officially attributed to electrostatic buildup. Maintenance logs indicate grounding systems across the observation sector were replaced. A handwritten note dated June 18, 1955, and signed but consistent with Mezentsev's prior annotations, states, resonance identical to pulse emission of 1952. No decay. System persists independently of stimulus. This is the final document in his handwriting prior to his cessation from daily logs. From July to October 1955, Section B4 underwent administrative restructuring. Personnel rotations increased, employees were reassigned to unrelated installations. Internal bulletins note integration of automated measurement systems, omitting reference to manual or legacy devices. An internal report from November bears a faint pencil note, not all located. On January 9, 1956, the official personnel entry states, engineer-physicist, second category L, Mezentsev, relieved of active duties due to health considerations. Further participation in fieldwork suspended. No attached medical record or reassignment order survives. The remaining pages comprise administrative correspondence regarding missing laboratory property. An internal memo dated April 22, 1956 states, inventory discrepancies persist for 2 unregistered photometric housings and 1 prototype Geiger counter previously documented as confiscated. Responsible, Mezentsev, Ret. The line Mezentsev, Ret. is underlined. A supplementary note, attached decades later but retroactively stamped 1956, adds, the final report authored by engineer Mezentsev is not present in transferred materials. Probable destruction prior to reclassification. Faint pencil marginalia reads, or withheld. No further information was recorded.